we'll see the various socket methods. Okay, now hope you remember. I'll just go a quick revision between socket and server socket. You have Alice and Bob. You have a socket at Ali's side. You even have a socket at Bob's side. Okay, the socket at the client side is called socket, and the socket at the server side, it is called server socket. Okay, this is what we saw last day. Now we'll continue with socket methods. We will continue with socket methods. Okay, now socket, the constructor to create an object will have two arguments. One is the IP address and the second one will be port number. This is to create a socket. Then we can close the socket, and we even have a method called get input stream. Get input stream, which will of course return an input stream so that data can be read from the socket. You even have get output stream, which will return an output stream so that data may be written onto the socket. So input stream is for reading and output stream is for writing. You even have set so time. It is to set a time period so that a particular read can be blocked. So these are socket methods, or these are client side methods. These are client side methods. Now let's see about the server socket methods. Server socket, as you all know, it will be on the server side. To create a server socket, you only have one argument, the port. But to create a client socket, you will be having two arguments. Okay, so please have that in mind. To create a client socket, you will have two arguments. But to create a server socket, you will only have one argument. Now, the server will be accepting a connection from the client, or the server socket will be accepting a connection from the socket. Okay, so you have a method called accept. You have a method called accept so as to accept for a connection from the client socket. It is a method in the server socket which accepts a connection from the client. Then you even have a method called close so as to close the socket. And then you have a method called set so time. Okay, set so time so that for a particular period of time, the accept, getting the connection, can be blocked. So the main methods are creating a socket, closing it, reading, writing. Here also creating a server socket, accepting it, reading, writing, and then closing. Now let us see about a concept called port. Now every socket, let's say I have got Alice over here and I've got Bob over here. Alice will have a socket. Bob will also have a socket. Now, each socket, you will have port numbers. Let's say I've got a few port numbers on both the client socket and the server socket. Now, this is my client and this is my server. Listening for a connection from the client is done through port numbers, or even requesting a connection to a server from a socket happens through port numbers. Okay, now let's say I've got a port number. The first dot I show over you, it is one port number, the second, third, fourth, and so on. Now let's say A has a port number. I'll go for a random number, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, now the client is telling, I have a port 1357 through which I am planning to make a connection. I have a port 1357 through which I am planning to make a connection. Now, what will the server do? The server also will be opening up a port with the same number 1357, and the connection in the server and the client will happen through that same port number 1357. Okay, so that is what you mean by a port number. A port number is actually a numerical value. Okay, you can say it will be a number, it will usually integer. A port number is an integer through which you communicate via your socket. Okay, now I've given the differences between a socket and a port. As you all know, socket is an endpoint. Socket is an endpoint through which you can send data and you can receive data. Port is nothing but a numerical value assigned so that you can have communications through your socket. Socket, it acts as an interface to send and receive data. Port, a specific application. Now in this particular application, I am planning to do 1357. In another application, I might go for 1501. So in my server also, I'll have a port called 1501, and then I will be doing a connection between my 1501s. Okay, so a socket, you can have different port numbers based upon the different applications you want to communicate between. Now let's see the various steps followed. This is a quick revision of what we saw earlier. We will be talking now with respect to port numbers. First, what you do is you will create a server socket and then give it a particular port number. After which the server will listen for a connection from the client and accept it. After which you will be doing your reading and writing, and then you will close the connection. I will go for a quick revision. You have the client, you have the server, or I'll say you have Alice and Bob, you have A and B. Okay. The port number, let's say 1503. Okay. The server is telling, I am ready to go for connections with the number 1503. So what the client should do is, client should also open up, be ready to give a request from 1503. So the client gives a request through port number 1503. Your server is already ready to receive a request from 1503. So what happens? The connection is made. Okay. Once the connection is made and the server tells I'm ready, the server accepts it, you go on transmitting your data. Now this is how it happens. You open up a client with a socket and a port number. The server is always in a listening mode. Okay. Once the server accepts, yeah, I have a connection made. Once the connection is made, I can read and write. I can read and write. Once the reading writing is done, I will be closing my connection. This is how things happen. You will have a client socket. You will have a server socket. You will be reading and writing with the help of your output stream and the input stream at both the client and the server. The client will have an output stream and input stream. The server will also have an input stream and output stream, which will help you in read, write at both the ends. Now let's see one more thing. Now you have a client, you even have a server, okay? You have Alice and you've got the Bob, the famous cryptographic couple. Okay. Now never say you don't know Alice and Bob. They are the most famous cryptographic couple in the world. Okay. Now you're sending a request, server receives. Okay. Now once the server receives a request from the client, a new socket will be created for read write, so that the old socket can be used for other requests. So look here, at the client side I've got 2 and the server side 1 will do. Okay, so look here, I've got C1 and C2. You create new sockets so that the old socket, it can be used again for listening, and via C2 you can be doing your read write. You call these multi-sockets. Now, there are several strategies in which the server can interact with the client. The basic thing is called serial. Okay, you will have one client at a time, which is catered by the server. Or you can even have forking. Okay, forking means, you know, it'll look like this. Okay, a fork, looking like a fork. Separate process for each request. Or you could even have a threaded approach. Now, I'll have a new class. I'll have a program called SOC client. Okay, I'll even create one more. SOC server. Okay, now I've got 2 programs, SOC client and SOC server. Now I will write it side by side. I'll even open up one more new console. Okay, so now I've got 2 programs, the SOC client and the SOC server. So this is my client program. This is my client program. This is my client program. And this is my server program. Now let us start doing it. Okay. Now, as I told you earlier, you should be importing. You should be importing the .NET package. Import java.net.star. I'll even import the IO because I will be using the IO, java.io.star. I'll be using it in both places. So I'll just do a copy paste, Control C, Control V. I do have package net over here because I am doing it in a folder called net, short for networking. Okay. Now I'll start doing my program. I'll first write my client side. Okay. Now you have to first create sockets. Now I am going to create a client socket. To create a client socket, you have a keyword called socket, simply socket. So I'll write socket s equal to new socket. I'm creating a socket. Now, as I earlier told you, to create a client socket, you should have 2 arguments. You should even have your IP number together with the port number. IP and the IP, not IP number. You should even have the IP address and the port number. As of now, I am planning to have two different programs on my same machine. So I'll write it localhost. Localhost, I'll just give a random number. Let's say I'll give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I am creating a server socket. So what I've done is I've created a client socket. I've created a client socket which has the IP address, which is the local host, and I even have a port number, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, when you do your client server, please have it in your try catches. Okay, so I'll just have a try catch over here. I'll have a try catch, catch exception. E. I'll just finish off my exception business, SOP, system.out.println, let's say E. Okay, I'll just copy the same thing over here. Okay. Now, all what I've done is I have now created a client socket with the required things. Now, all what I've done is I've got Alice who is planning to make a connection to Bob. So I'll just have an SOP. I'll just have an SOP over here. Okay. Alice waiting for a connection with Bob. Okay. So now, with this particular line, what happens is Alice are the client. Okay. Alice is the client. Alice is waiting for a connection with Bob. Now let's imagine Bob accepted the connection. Let us imagine Bob accepted the connection. We have not done the server side because, we'll just finish up the client side first. Imagine Bob accepted. Okay. Imagine Bob accepted the connection. Okay. Now, once Bob has accepted the connection, Alice is planning to send some data to Bob. Okay. So imagine Bob accepts the connection. Alice will send data and Bob will have to receive it. Now let's see how will Alice send data to Bob. Now we are planning to see how Alice will send data to Bob. Now, for the time being, what we will do is we will just have a simple message like, let's say, hello Bob. Okay, we'll have a message called hello Bob. This is what I'm planning to send. Okay, so this is an inbuilt message which I am not taking in from the keyboard. I am planning to send hello Bob through the program itself. Now, the data which is sent through sockets, you will be giving it out through output stream. Hope you remember you had a method called get output stream. I am planning to send data to Bob in the form of an output stream. Okay, get output stream. Okay, now from where do I get this output stream? I get this output stream from my socket. From my client socket s dot get output stream, I am sending it. I am planning to send it to my server. Now, data will be transmitted from the client to the server in the form of object output stream. Okay, so I write object output stream. Let's say OUT is equal to new object output stream s dot get output stream. Okay, I'll correct everything later. Import, my spelling was wrong, that is why. Okay, now, so what I'm planning to do is I am planning to send this data from the client to the server, and that transmission is going to happen through my object output stream. So I'm getting data from my socket. Okay, my socket is S. My client socket is S. I'm getting data, getting an output stream from S, and then I am planning to transmit it to my server. Now, how will I transmit it to my server? I need to write it on my server. Oh, no. To write it on my server, I have a method called .write. Okay, now the writing, it will happen in the UTF or the byte stream. Okay, it will be happening in the Unicode format. So let's say I'll simply write hello Bob. Okay, so I'll write OUT dot write UTF. Okay, so I'm writing hello Bob onto my output stream, and this output stream will be or should be received by my server program. Okay, so that's it. I'll just close everything. Okay, so I have an out. I'll close my out. Okay, I even have a socket called S. I'll even close my socket. So that's it, my server program. Sorry, my client program. So all what I've done is I've created a client socket. Okay, I've created an output stream, and I am sending hello Bob onto my server. Now come to my server side. Now, server side, I'll just move my indenting so that you can see everything together in a single line. Now, my server, I should create a server socket. I should create a server socket, let's say SS. Okay, server socket SS is equal to new server socket. Okay, I am now creating my server socket. Now, what is the job of the server socket? The server socket should be open to receive a connection or make a connection with the port number called 1235. Okay, so now my server socket is telling I have a port number called 1235. Anybody giving a request from 1235, I will be accepting. Okay, so this guy is planning to give from 1235, and this guy is telling I am open for 1235. Okay, so now that part is clear. The port numbers are same. So now I will be able to create a connection. Now the server socket has to accept. Server is always, as I told you, server socket is in a listening mode. Okay, so I'll write here. I can write over here. Let's see. Server or Bob. Server Bob is listening for connections. Okay, now here what the server is telling is I am ready to take up connections from 1235, and this guy is telling I am ready to give in connections from 1235. Now the server socket has to accept, the server socket has to accept the connection from the client. Now from the client, so I write socket S is equal to SS dot accept. So what happens over here is the server socket is accepting the connection from the client socket. So I write socket over here, not server socket. I write socket over here because I'm planning to get a connection from my client. So I write socket S is equal to SS dot accept. Now once this is accepted, as I told you earlier, the server socket SS, he can be ready to take other new connections. Anyway, let that happen side by side. Now the connection has been made. Okay, so I'll just give an SOP over here. I'll write. So once this is done, connection made with client and server. Okay, now with this particular line, you have now made connections. Okay, so the first job is over. You made a connection between the client and server. Client is now sending data. I now need to receive the data. I need to now receive the data. To receive the data, I will be having the object input stream. Okay, so I'll write object input stream in is equal to new object input stream s dot get input stream. Okay, so via my socket, I am planning to take in data from my client. And now once I get my data, what should I do? I should be able to read the data onto my, so I'll write read UTF. I will write read UTF. Okay, so in dot read UTF, where the data is now being read. But you know, there is a problem over here. As I was telling you, this hello Bob, it is given as a byte stream. It is given as a byte stream. You will need to convert it to your string. So for that, you will have to do a bit of a typecasting. So I simply write string str is equal to string. Okay, so what happened over here is I've read it. Now what I read, it is in a byte stream. I am now converting it to a string and storing it in str. And you know, I'll just SOP it. Control C, Control V, SOP. I'll write message from Alice is plus str. Okay, so that's it, my program. I'll save both my programs. I'll save both my programs before running them. Now I'll run my program. Now when you run your client server program, you should be always run the server program first. Why? Because the first thing which should happen is server should be in the listening mode. So to make your server always in the listening mode, run the server first and then only run the client first. Otherwise, what will happen is the client is telling, you know, I'm opening up a connection, but there's nobody to listen for your connection. Okay, so first what you'll have to do is first run the server and make it in the listening mode. Okay, so I put my cursor over here. This is how you run a client server program, and then you run your server program. Okay, forget my spellings. Now what happens, you can see over here, server Bob is listening for connections. So all what happened over here is I've created a server socket and then I've told Bob is listening for connections. Okay, now only if I activate my client, I can have a connection with my server. Okay, so now what I've done, I've opened up my server and I've made him in the listening mode. Now I'm gonna run my client. Okay, I put my cursor over here and I am now running my client. Okay, I ran my client and now I got connection made with the client and server. Message from Alice is hello Bob. Okay, so the hello Bob from my client, I got it onto my server. Okay, if you want to see your client side over here exclusively, you can click client over here. So this is actually what happens with the client side. Okay, that is why I opened up a console over here to see what is happening in the client side alone. In the client side, all what happened is you created a socket and then Alice is waiting for a connection with Bob. But invariantly that happened. The connection was made, and then hello Bob, the message is got on the server side.